Welcome to Yes Also. I'm Susie Barrett. My guest today is the oh-so-talented and constantly working actor John Ross Bowie. You know him from shows like Speechless and The Big Bang Theory, and the improv world knows him as a longtime pillar of the UCB community. He was a member of Feature Feature, which perfected the movie form, and 1/4 of the Naked Babies, among other teams. I loved getting to hear John's origin story. I had no idea that he didn't come to improv until his late 20s, and it's pretty adorable that he and his wife Jamie Denbo met in their early days at UCB New York. You can check out pics of John's improv journey over at Yes Also Pod on Instagram. And if you're liking the pod, rate us, review us. It helps us out a lot. But enough about us. Let's hear from John. John, thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here.
So you do the thing where you record an intro before we start talking?
That's right.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I can send it to you if you'd like final approval.
I'm okay. I
look.
trust you. I really do. I look forward to hearing what you're going to say.
We were chatting on the way in. You were like, I'm excited to do this because I get to talk about this in a way that we don't normally get to talk about it in real life.
It's hard to talk about this stuff without confirming a lot of people's suspicions that it's a cult, and and I certainly don't want to do that. Because it's very niche. It's a subset of acting that a lot of actors are freaked out about and are weirdly judgmental around,
right,
and dismissive of. And I've heard it called a parlor trick many times.
Really?
Many times in my career. And I obviously don't think that's fair. So it's fun to just like sit down and geek out with somebody who really cares about the medium.
Yeah.
And and I love the title of this podcast, let me say.
Oh, thanks.
I think the Yes Also is I'm probably going to end up saying that naturally in conversation.
It comes
during
up.
The course. Yeah.
It comes up. What would the parlor trick of it be? Yeah, the trick is that I practiced for 20 years.
I know that I did 10,000 hours and I'm not pulling a fucking quarter out from behind your ear. No, I think it's people who are dismissive I honestly think it's people who fear what they don't understand. I think it's that simple. I've talked to very good actors who are who have never taken improv, are understandably freaked out by it, and so instead of retreating into a sort of admiration, are just saying like, oh, it's all you got to do is agree to the other person and you're done, which is not the case. I remember when I started taking classes, the very idea of an improv class alienated people. They're like, what do you do if you're just making it up? What do you do? Like, what are you doing in class? Not realizing that there's a series of techniques and rules and methods, and some of them are contradictory.
Right.
And there's a whole subset that is quite literally hundreds of years old. If we're going back to the Commedia dell'arte.
I was just going to say, are we talking Arlecchino?
Yeah,
dell'arte
when you get
stuff,
into like the Lazzi and the way they were customizing their shows for local areas, doing crowd work, and literally taking, stuff from the audience. This is a time-honored tradition, and I get very very about it.
Get angry. Get inflamed. Let's fight.
This is the place. Yeah. This is the place.
Take it out. Your the immediate depth of knowledge to me radiates that you went to theater school. Did you?
I did not.
You did not.
I did
You're
not.
You're just a super smarty pants.
No. Well, I was an English major.
Okay.
And so I read a lot of drama and read a lot of theater. And I grew up in New York City, literally in the theater district. I grew up about 3 blocks from Times Square.
That is insane.
So theater was super expensive even then, but my parents, for all their myriad issues, prioritized that. And so I got to see some really cool stuff, not just on Broadway, but some weird off-Broadway stuff. You're kind of immersed in it in a way. And it's actually one of the reasons that it took me so long to become an actor, because I knew that it wasn't all just award shows and premieres. I saw like the real actors who lived on my block, who were struggling, who were waiting tables, who did have theater degrees and were struggling.
Right.
And that scared me. I was like, wow, this looks like a really fun job when they let you do it. But look at this massive amount of unemployment.
Yeah,
you know?
look at this guy in a tank top and pancake makeup, like hoofing it with his gym bag to like
Look at
Leonardo's pizza place. And,
look at the guy who shows up to pick up. This is a core memory of leaving elementary school on 45th Street. I would have been in 3rd grade, and I was talking to my friend, and I met my mom, and my friend's dad came over and said, "Can you watch my son? I have to go to an audition." Oh. And he was like panic in his eyes, like a real sense of like, I'm going to bet my last chip on black, and this is going to work out, you know? And it was terrifying. So no, I did not go to theater school at all. I was scared off. And I had to get to like this place in my late 20s where nothing else was working career-wise, and I had to at least try acting. But I didn't even have the courage to say, I will take an acting class. I said, well, I'll take an improv class just to sort of dip my toes in.
So even you were watering it down.
Even I was watering it down.
Yeah,
even I was looking at it through this lens of like, well, this isn't real acting. You know, I can sort of dip my toes in, or maybe I'm doing it from a more writerly perspective. It's a huge step. It really is a huge step to come out and say, I want to be an actor.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at, like, let's say you make it into the Screen Actors Guild. That guild has what? 15% steady employment, if that? Probably less so right now.
Right.
So it's a big, big step, and it's going to sound a little like folly to the layman that you're going to hurl yourself into this abyss.
Yeah.
But there was something about, honestly, if I had started with a conventional scene study class, even if I had shown some aptitude at it, I don't think I would have stuck with it. But there's something about improv throwing you into the deep end emotionally. You know, there was much talk in the early UCB days, and still is, of following the fear, which was amazing because I was starting to have my first real serious panic attacks at the same time.
What a great coincidence!
Yeah, you know, but it was this situation where I was like, well, let's follow that fear. Let's see where it takes us.
I mean, good for you, because you know, for some brains that could be a real moment of like, easy for you to say. This is brand new to me. I've never met these people. I'm on the cusp of like a career crisis, identity crisis, and I'm having very real physical panic attacks.
Very physical panic attacks. Very physical panic attacks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and in some ways it was. Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of other stuff going on. I was writing marketing copy for a consulting firm. That was like my full-time. It wasn't a temp job anymore. I was full-time.
How much marketing copy does that firm need that they're hiring you full-time?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm sure they are no longer hiring people. I'm sure those are independent contractors now. Not much. And that was another thing, is like I would work on a brochure for the utilities branch of our consulting wing, and I would just sit around and try to look busy. It was horrible. I was really not, it was not the kind of writing I excelled at. But I was also, I was in this place where like I could do this for the rest of my life and become sort of a weird caricature of my dad, who also, I think, harbored artistic dreams, but was in an office for his entire life. Or I could really take a swing for this. And let it be said before anyone goes, my God, how brave, what a journey. Moving back home, which I had to do at 27, meant moving into an apartment on West 44th Street. I was like, right. I was back in the theater district. It was it wasn't like I had to move back home to Ohio to make this work out. I was able to just sleep in the room that had used to be my bedroom, and it was humiliating, but it was super convenient.
Right.
You know, it's like moving back home is still right off the Times Square subway station.
Yeah, amazing.
So I am incredibly fortunate in that regard.
Right.
That, you know, when I decided to upend my life and break up with my girlfriend and quit this job, I had a very local place to land.
Right. Plus, Times Square is a real who's who. I've seen Superman there. I've seen Elmo, SpongeBob.
A lot of networking.
Yeah.
I was able to do a lot of networking there.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm glad you brought up Elmo. I have the funniest story. I'm kidding.
It turned out to be funny. So when you started improv classes, were you at the very original UCB? I picture you as like a ground floor UCB guy. When did you come in?
I'm not quite a ground floor UCB. Ground floor UCB to me means your Andy Secundas, Paul Scheer, Rob Hubel, Andy Daly, Secunda and Daly I went to college with.
Cool.
We went to Ithaca together.
Oh, wow.
And they were, Daly was theater, Secunda was film. I was
marketing
literature.
Copy.
I was literature with a focus on becoming a high school teacher, but we hung out and Secunda and I kept in touch, and he had been pushing me to try improv classes for a while, and I had to everything had to kind of fall apart in my life for me to be like, yeah, I'll give that a try. Sure.
Like, I am busy finishing Infinite Jest. Talk to me in 4 years. Then maybe I'll have some free time.
That's amazing. No, it was much later that I finished it, but I fucking did. But I did.
You get to brag. You do. You do.
The key thing there, and you have a copy. I see. It's 2 bookmarks is the key, right? You have 1 bookmark for the text and 1 bookmark for the footnotes, right? Yeah, my man knows what I'm talking about. Ladies.
I did own it. You
did own a copy?
Yeah.
That's half the battle. That's half the battle.
I cracked it a few times. It's a
motherfucker. Anyway.
Okay.
So I'm not ground floor. Like the next, I start in spring 98.
Yeah.
So at that point, you know who it was? Level 1 was no longer being taught by Ian. Ian went to the higher levels, and they brought in Armando Diaz from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was in, I think, actually the first class he taught in New York. Spring 98, and we were quite literally not on the ground floor. We were on the 5th floor in this theater called Solo Arts Group, which was in Chelsea, but kind of near what they call Ladies Mile, that stretch of 6th Avenue that used to be all department stores. And there was this really cool 99-seat theater, 5 stories up. The elevator hardly ever worked. And that's where I took my level 1 class with Armando.
Amazing. How soon after starting class did you fall in love with improv?
Oh, immediately. I got some admittedly cheap laughs in that first class. And I've told this story before. The woman who coordinated the classes was a woman named Celia Bresak, who was a bit older than the rest of us, and she was taking free classes in exchange for being sort of their logistical manager and handling the school such as it was. And she wanted to take with Armando, so she took level 1 again, and she was in my class. And here's another core memory. I went up. I did a scene. Armando does this great exercise on the first day of level 1 where he puts 2 people up on stage, gives you a potentially contentious situation, and asks you to find the agreement. In our case, it was 2 guys showing up to pick up the same girl for a date. And,
find the agreement, meaning...
don't fight.
Yep.
Get up there and try not to argue.
Yep.
And I was here first. None of that shit. Find a way to make it peaceful. And look, did we get laughs because the 2 of us went out for drinks afterwards? Clearly, was it a very, very low-hanging fruit gay joke? Yes. And I'm not proud of that.
It was a different time.
It was 1998, Susie.
Yes.
Okay, it
very
was not
different.
That different a time.
It was a time before everyone was gay.
I am not a Bill Clinton. It's true. It was before that. But I literally sat down in my chair, and I get emotional talking about this every time I bring it up, every time it comes up. Celia Bresak turned around to me and said, "Oh, so you're an actor?" And I was like, "I'm not, but fuck, maybe I should be. Maybe that would make me happy." And I shout her out all the fucking time. I don't know. She's still in New York. And I run into her occasionally when I'm back there, and it's always awesome. But I name checked her in a book I wrote. Great. Celia's the best. But yeah, Celia looked at me, total fucking stranger, and assumed I was an actor.
What affirmation and what a
out of the gate.
The soothsayer just saw you.
Basically, yeah. It was incredible. And here's the thing. Again, I had taught. Okay, so I had done a bunch of things adjacent, a bunch of performative things that were adjacent to acting, because I had been on the college radio station, which is how I got over a really gnarly fear of public speaking.
Oh, really?
I was the kid who like would do an oral report in high school, but have like diarrhea all day leading up to it. Just horrific anxiety about public speaking.
Wow.
And looking stupid. So the oral report like hit both of those things really hard.
Right.
Those were two huge hurdles that I had to get over. I'm still frankly working through the looking stupid part.
We all are.
Yeah. It's still a deep fear of mine.
I have horrible news. None of us look cool.
No, I know that by virtue of the fact that we're doing improv right out of the gate, I guess. Yeah. But so I did that, and then I had to do my student teaching at Ithaca High School. And then I went back to New York and I taught at my old high school for a year. And then I was in a band for a few years, singing in a band. So it was not like I was just a marketing copywriter who was hurled up onto the stage. I had some experience in front of people. Mm-hmm. But still, that step of saying, I want to be an actor was crazy. And I'm never, ever, trying to figure out a diplomatic way to put this. There's a lot of people who have to keep secrets or are ashamed or are embarrassed of something and then eventually have to tell their parents. Mm-hmm. And I'm not equating what I went through, but I have a little extra empathy for people who had to like come out to their parents or whatever, just because I had to look my conservative father in the eye and say, Dad, not only do I want to be an actor, but I need to borrow money to join the Screen Actors Guild. And I know you voted against unions your entire life.
Yeah.
But I really need you to hook me up and I'm going to be able to pay you back.
I mean, I have talked about it before that like there is so much overlap with my own experience with coming out to my parents and other people like coming out as wanting to be actors.
Really? You've brought out this before? That's good to hear, because I feel like it feels a little bit like stolen valor when I talk about this.
I mean,
like,
it is.
Obviously, it is. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, your struggles are nothing, John.
Yeah.
But no, there is something about, this is a part of me that I have squashed for a very long time, and the only way I'm going to be happy is if I deal with it head on.
It is like an almost mythic, like an archetypical human. It's like a pillar of experience to have something inside that is a shameful secret that you're scared to admit and scared to do and be, and then walking through the threshold of deciding to live as yourself and do what makes you happy. Parents be damned.
And to extend the metaphor, I was also so vehemently actor phobic before I came out. I was also like the kind of guy who like looked at people running lines on the bus and be like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Right.
Thoroughly annoyed with people doing vocal exercises.
I was
thoroughly annoyed with people talking about their instrument and their craft. And again, Midtown Manhattan, living around a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I was vehemently actor phobic before I was able to be like, no, because I'm jealous is my deal.
Yeah. I remember making homophobic jokes in high school. And I look back and I'm like, good Lord. Just scared, ashamed me that like was so closeted I didn't even know, and just kind of trying to like fit in. So yeah, it is wild. But I do think it is like you're not stealing any valor. Also, I didn't get any valor for coming out. But
but it obviously takes courage, and a level of courage in terms of on such a higher level. But it is nice to hear you like respond to the parallels, I guess.
What's that Joseph Campbell quote? The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are, or something like that. It's
I love that.
Yeah, it's like there's no greater thing that you can achieve than just by starting to live as yourself. Because at least then you're standing in your own truth and you're not doing anything for someone else or to please them or to fit a mold. It's you. So that's where what a privilege. So you are now in UCB classes. You are like, Celia called me an actor.
I got headshots between levels 1 and 2.
It was that fast.
It was that fast.
God, do you still have a copy of your first headshot?
Yeah, you want to see it?
Oh, you have it presently?
I found it. I didn't find it recently. Somebody found their copy of my headshot and sent it to me. What am I? I'm 27. I am sitting at a table, but I've got my elbows on the table and I'm leaning forward and I'm leaning into the camera in this way that sort of says, "Let me in." Hi.
Ding dong.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Hello.
Sorry to interrupt your dinner.
Yeah, but
do you need an actor?
Hi, how are you, show business? Can I help? And there's a neediness. We didn't use the term thirst yet, but oh my God, the thirst in this photograph.
Yeah, you were dying of thirst. You were
Dying
day
of
40
thirst.
in the desert.
Oh my Lord.
Crawling on your elbows.
And the only water was the validation of auditions. Yeah. But yeah, I kind of started making up for lost time. I really got into it, and was pretty fortunate early on.
Yeah. Fortunate because you started booking roles, or because you were having success in the improv world, or both?
Both, actually. Yeah, I got back in my day. It was. The theater was still so small that they needed people on stage more than people needed stage time. So it was very easy to get on a Herald team. I don't know that I could survive the cutthroat world of modern day UCB with hundreds of people auditioning for Herald teams. That sounds exhausting. But in our day, Armando just took a bunch of us and threw us on a team once we were done with level 3, which we took with Matt Walsh. I took level 1 Armando, level 2 Amy Poehler.
Wow.
In that class was Seth Morris and a young lady named Jamie Denbo,
Your
my bride,
current wife,
who I made my baby mama, and
well, she also made you her baby daddy.
100%. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I made her
patriarch the shit out of that. But yeah, so I got onto a Herald team very quickly.
Pause for a second. Do you remember any nuggets from having Amy Poehler as a teacher? I always ask people because people are like, she was the best teacher. And then I'm like, tell me a thing that she said.
Well, she was just, there's no she didn't have canned phrases. Both her parents are teachers. It's important to remember that she is from a lineage of educators. And there is a myth that good improvisers automatically make good teachers. And I don't think that's always the case. And that, you want to get philosophically nerdy about that, I can go on.
Let's do it.
Well, yeah. I worry sometimes that they have the least experienced teachers teach level 1. I don't know that they should do that.
Yeah.
I think you've got to be able to articulate some very brass tacks things to your level 1 students that 10,000 hours of improv training won't necessarily instill in you. You've got to be able to learn, and here it comes, the pedagogical means to impart that information to a level 1 class who are not predisposed to understand all this.
You're bridging a much larger gap.
Much larger gap. And I think it is not for the faint of heart. And it's interesting. There's a lot of teachers in the UCB community, like actual trained teachers. Like Donna Furman has a teaching certification. Sean Conroy has a teaching certification. I have one. There's a few of us who actually were like, no, I taught 10th grade English. I can help out with these guys. But to your question about Amy told me a couple of amazing things personally that I really needed to hear. Don't be too cool for school, because there was still a part of me that was very arch and standing outside of scenes and sort of commenting on and getting laughs by being like the snarky straight man. But it's cheap. You're not quite denying the reality, but nor are you completely in the reality.
And you're
either.
talking about straight manning in a way where you're a little detached from the scene. You're not committed as a character that's saying things based on the truth of this moment.
Yeah.
You're kind of arms crossed going, yeah, do you always enter a room with a backpack?
Yeah. You're a terrible doctor, that that kind of thing.
Right.
And instead of just like being like, in the
doctor.
moment. Yeah. And that was a real hurdle that I had to get over. There's that great Harold Ramis story that Harold Ramis used to tell all the time, because he was apparently the same way when he started taking improv classes. He was and you can see this in some of his early work. You see this in Stripes a little bit. He's not quite he's sort of outside even in the battle scenes. He's sort of commenting and being a smart ass.
Right.
And, it's almost like even on film, he's sort of 3/4 cheating out, winking at the audience.
Right.
And apparently Del Close took him aside at one point and said, someday you're going to look in the mirror and say, I'm so cute and I'm only 45. That brutal?
Yeah.
That fucking brutal?
I'm also not entirely sure what it means.
It means don't do that. Don't be the one who's just sort of playing to the audience and is the adorable smart ass.
Look at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so
I was so at risk of becoming that. And the 1-2 punch of me reading that story, because that was the other thing. I also went right into the books, Something Wonderful right away. All those, the book about the oral history about the compass, obviously Truth and Comedy, Improv by Keith Johnstone. I went into the history of this stuff hardcore. I was really like one of those guys who finds Christ in AA and just goes all in,
right.
And is suddenly 6 months in and they're quoting scripture.
Yeah, you're immediately cross stitching things on pillows.
Yeah, I went hardcore.
Yeah.
I really did, and that taught me a lot. And the other thing she said to me, which I'll never forget, and I find myself saying it to myself in my head: watch your fucks, Bowie.
Watch your fucks.
Watch your fucks. You get nervous, you say fuck a lot. I'm like, 100%. I
Great.
do. There's absolutely no reason this used car salesman has to be saying fuck quite so much. You've got me dead to rights, lady. She was great. And I saw her do that with a bunch of people. She would absolutely... It was never just like canned phrases that she'd heard in another class. She would customize her instruction in a way that you felt seen and supported.
Yeah.
But also shaped.
Yeah, great. True mentorship.
Yeah, no, she was
connection.
Really great.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think when you talk about the like level 1 teachers thing, I don't know this for sure, but I'm imagining that a lot of the newer teachers are placed there because it's like they're not as jaded yet, or they're not as like...
Oh, that might be it, yeah.
It's like they're so stoked to be
and that's
on
valid.
the teaching staff, and that's sort of the same vibe you want to foster in a 101 is like, hey, we're all here from different backgrounds, and my job is to make you fall in love with this stuff.
Right.
Like, I'm giving you the sample of the crack so that you come back for
precisely.
level 2. Yeah.
Here's the free one.
Yeah.
And I am getting high on my own stash. There's that's really valid, and that's a really good point. I
think
I love teaching level 1.
That was one of my favorites too.
Yeah,
I loved 1 and 4.
Yeah, exactly.
The most. Yeah,
I hated 2. I hated getting to like the math of the Herald. I found that really exhausting.
Yeah,
and but 1 was great for the demographics of it because you've got. It's just everybody get in the pool, level 1, and especially at UCB where you don't audition to take a class the way you do at Groundlings. You just hop in, you know, they'll take your money and let's see what happens. And so you get the people who studied elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You get the actors who were told by their agents that this is going to help them book commercials.
Right.
You get the substitute teacher with the summer off.
Yeah.
The lawyer who conned his firm into paying for this class.
You're missing one. You've hit all the archetypes I was going to name except one. See if you can get a bingo.
The divorce lady looking to scare herself. Yes. Okay. All right. So we're all on the same page here.
That's so funny.
It's the best. It's the absolute best. And it's always, and that sounds like cheaply misogynist. It's more freshly divorced women than it is freshly divorced guys.
Yes.
For whatever reason. That's just the way it plays out.
And
freshly divorced guys get into like racquetball or some shit. I don't know how that
Who
works.
knows?
I don't know what they're doing with themselves.
But there's like
cars.
Cars.
Car restoration.
Yeah, I'm a car guy now. I flew out to watch a NASCAR race, and now I live here.
Yeah, precisely.
On day 1 when people would introduce themselves, there was always one that was like, I'm Linda, I'm 55, I just got divorced, and I want to do something new.
My kids are freshmen at GW, and I'm amazing.
I want to try something.
I love Linda. Linda.
Linda.
I have always loved Linda. Linda is my shit.
And she's always one of the best ones in the class because she doesn't give a shit.
Doesn't give a shit and has bonkers life experience.
Right.
I mean, like,
Yeah, the specifics that Linda can come up
bring
with.
to it. Linda has faced real loss. Linda's parents are dead.
Right.
The whole nine with Linda. She's great.
And every single person in the class is rooting for her.
That's also a great thing. The vibe when Linda gets up there and everyone's like jumping to get up with her. And the scene might not be amazing, but it's going to be pretty interesting at the very least.
Oh, at the very least. And people are clapping as soon as she just like goes to get up, you know. And then you can watch her throughout the course of the 8 weeks.
And she crushes the student show.
Crushes
the student show.
And her friends are there to see her.
Fuck yes, they are.
Yes.
Oh my God. And they're going to go out and have some fucking zin after the show. And they are amazed in Linda. And then they're going to take the class. It's great.
It's great. Yeah. The whitest zin from the sutteriest home. It is that feeling of 101 where like you can watch a journey of someone find their groove, find their confidence, and simultaneously you can watch maybe the very arrogant actor who's like, I don't know, I already know how to do this. You can watch them find some humility
and
or
get their wings clipped a little bit and maybe get good or maybe not get good, and then they're no longer level 2's problem. You know, there's a few interesting things that happen. I loved teaching level 1. I still go back. I don't teach level 1 anymore, but I still teach at UCB occasionally. I'll drop in and do like 8 weeks of something. But I should let people know that I'm available to sub their level 1. I think that'd be a blast.
I mean, they're hearing it on this podcast.
Yeah.
But blast it out there. Do you coach?
I don't. Have
coach. You ever?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. I used to coach all the time. I coached a ton in New York, and I coached, last day of school?
Yeah.
I was their coach for like 2 years. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I lived with Jim at the time. So,
of course. Right. Of course, yeah. So and that was Murderers Row, that team. That was
incredible.
Heather Campbell, Neil Campbell, no relation. Paul Rust was on that team.
Right.
It was just great. Nick Weiger,
Jim Woods, David Harris. Yeah, just a great.
Yeah, so many strong people.
Team.
I was so honored to even be asked. And the only reason I stopped is because I had a kid, and I couldn't quite make that work.
Right.
And then I stopped teaching. I was still teaching up until my second kid, and then I was like, I can't just, But now that my kids are somewhat independent teenagers, I kind of want to get back into it.
Yeah, get back in. I'd be curious too to see like to hear from you, like how your teaching has changed, or like how, if there's anything that distance and more life experience has given you when you come back to it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Do you still teach?
I do sometimes. I mostly teach workshops on my own. So I'll like tour to places and teach workshops in like foreign countries or like other cities.
What a great way to travel.
It's the best.
Oh my God.
I want to ask you, when you were a coach, what was sort of what's your bag? Like, what are the things that you think are most important for people to work on? Or like, what was some people are like, let's get silly together, or some people are like, we need to just tuck in and do long patient scenes, or we need to, like, what was your...
Well, so I got so into UCB, there was a period of time between my level 2 and my level 3 classes in New York where the UCB stopped teaching because they were opening up their own space in a rented old burlesque house, the famous old Harmony Burlesque Theater on 22nd Street. And that was such a logistical undertaking that they stopped teaching for a little while. But I had the bug at this point, so I started fucking around on them. And my side pieces were a couple of other troupes that were working in New York at the time. One called Burn Manhattan, which was directed by Shira Piven, but it had Todd Stashwick, who works all the time, very steadily working character actor. Burn Manhattan did very physical contact improv. They were all Chicago guys. They moved to Manhattan, and they started doing this really very physical, very. I don't think they even called it improv. I think they called it spontaneous theater or something like that.
Is that like similar to like Richard Schechner stuff, like environmental?
I don't know Richard Schechner, but yeah, very environmental. The big thing with them, like the thing that we were all in awe of, is they didn't take suggestion.
Right.
They just came out, and their piano player would start noodling, and they would fuck around with that, and they would go on these. So the scenes were very abstract, and very broad and movement based. And there was sort of a weird like stylistic grudge between them and UCB.
Sure.
That like dated back to Chicago.
You don't say.
Because, and I love UCB, but they, it was very very logical.
Yeah.
Very, it was very Besser's philosophy of like brain first improv. As much as they say don't think, they would like you to think.
Yeah.
They would actually like you to think, and that's fine.
They would like you to think so much and so frequently that it becomes second nature and stops feeling like thinking.
Precisely.
They would like you to rewire your brain to like play a game and hit patterns and remember things to call back. Yeah.
Very much so. So I was very influenced by that. And then there was another guy in New York, another Chicago expat named Rob Reese. He had a group called Amnesia Wars. And Amnesia Wars he was into this sort of like method improv shit. And by which I mean he would stop a scene in the middle and go, how do you feel about the other person on stage? How do you feel about this character? Mm-hmm. And he did this, he had this exercise that called Who, What, Who, Where, I Feel. You and I come out on stage. I identify us and say what we're doing. And I identify myself, say what we're doing. You identify yourself and say where we are. And then I attach an emotion to it, and you attach an emotion to it.
Can we try it?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a butcher. I'm at a slaughterhouse.
Okay. I'm a mother of infant twins, and I need some cheap meat.
I am full of pity.
I am willing to do anything.
Great. So that was the exercise.
Okay. But then you would do the scene?
Not always.
No, you just do that.
Sometimes you would start a scene based on that. Other times the next two people would just come up and start there. And his big thing was the emotion of the scene. And that is something I press my students on really hard, even though it's not strictly UCB curriculum, but I find it gives you a deeper scene if it isn't just two people trading pop culture references.
Of course.
And like really, how do you people, and I'm not trying to take us into some sort of like psychodrama, we're going to improvise an incredibly sad Arthur Miller play, but there needs to be emotional underpinnings in comedy for it to work.
Right. And often that provides the engine of the scene. Your emotion creates what you want in the scene. Like, what do you want here?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to do, or what are you hoping for, or what? And that creates the roadmap of like where you go after that initial beat,
It's going to give your scene an arc.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to build on that emotion, or you're going to be able to pull back from that emotion.
Right.
And I think if there's anything that distinguishes my teaching, it's the fact that I use all the UCB stuff of what is the game? What's the first unusual thing? Play to the height of your intelligence. But I'm like, what are you doing with your body? What is your body doing right now? How is that going to help you? Where is your center of gravity? I
love that.
How's your posture right now? How does that affect how you're seeing things? Sort of Keith Johnstone status stuff, sprinkled in there. And I'm always asking, what are the emotional underpinnings of this scene?
Right.
How do you guys feel about each other? And how is that going to influence where this goes? Especially if we end up doing a second or third beat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my bag.
I love that. Very actory, in a great way. Like it's, that is the counterpoint to the headiness of.
But it shouldn't be. I feel like they should all work together.
They do. They do. I'm saying counterpoint, not like they're arguing in a debate. It's the balance.
It's the balance.
It's
hopefully.
Yeah. We need that on the other side of the scale to reach equilibrium and to have like all the elements.
I did a really fun class right before the pandemic. I did this class twice actually, which was called Scene Study for the Improviser.
Oh, great.
And it was all the high level students, but it was like all the smart asses put into a room, about 14 of them, all of them high level, like Herald team guys and everything. And I was like, great, fantastic. Here's a scene from True West. All right, here we go. So what's the first unusual thing to happen in this scene?
Oh, this is great.
What
I
is
would love
the
to take
game
this.
of this scene? And the connection is, again, it was trying to like connect between what's the game of the scene and what's your active intention. So what's your active intention? And I'm putting that in quote marks because you hear it a lot in acting textbooks. You know, what do you want from this other person? Well, that's very closely connected to the game of the scene. And God, there was some cool stuff that happened in those classes.
Like what?
You had these people who were incredibly fast on their feet, but then would get really flustered when they had a script in hand and knew exactly what they were going to say. And once they knew what they were going to say, they'd suddenly lose all spontaneity. So I was like, no, you don't have to do that. You can learn the lines well enough that they're just going to fall out of your mouth, but you have a level of presence from your 10,000 hours in improv that a lot of scripted actors aren't going to have access to.
Right.
You're going to be able, and there, it's basically the sort of thing that Meisner is trying to get you to.
I was
the sort
just
of repetition
gonna say,
exercises.
yeah.
It's the same kind of idea of just making sure that you are locked in with your scene partner, and the slightest little change is going to affect you.
Right.
The slightest little inflection shift in this line that was written 100 years ago is going to change you.
Right.
It was fun.
Yeah, Meisner used to talk about like the emotion and what's happening between the actors and how they're affecting each other is the river. The dialogue is just a canoe that's bouncing along on the surface of that river.
Right.
So like rather than rigidly memorizing how you're going to say a line, that would be as foolish as saying like the canoe's going to go, it's going to tilt to the left when I put it in the river, and then it's going to tilt. It's like you don't know what the river's going to do. So
100%.
just get the lines down rote.
Yeah.
And have no meaning attached to them and have no like
and don't drown.
Don't drown.
Don't drown. Know your fucking lines.
Right. Yeah. Know them cold. Like get them
know
so
them
in there
backwards
that
and forwards
yes.
so that you can play.
And then, what the river is what's going on here. And
And that was really exciting. And I had some people in the class who were actually, theater people who did both. But there were a lot of people who were just the way I was at 27 and who were, incredibly quick with characters and were, the king of the yes and needed to loosen up enough to bring that into a scene from Proof, a scene from Doubt by John Patrick Shanley. It was really fucking fun.
Really heavy material.
Oh, that was the other thing too.
Yeah.
I kept it pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
I kept away from comedic stuff.
Right.
The idea being that with, and I found this in my acting work, with dramatic material, you have a little more freedom and a little more leeway because you're not. If you've done sitcom, I know you've done like improvised sitcom, but you've done like scripted comedy.
Yeah.
There's usually like 2 or 3 ways to really land a joke, and that's it.
Yeah.
This joke was written a certain way; it has to be delivered a certain way. But with a dramatic moment, there's a few different ways to play it, and that's fun, and that's exciting. And it was also the idea of just getting these kids a little more. These kids, everyone's in their 30s, but getting these guys a little more just relaxed about doing scripted work.
Yeah. That's great. What a useful thing to teach, both for the improviser and for the actor.
It was a blast.
Yeah. What do you think your what's your strength as an improviser, and what's your weakness, or what do you think you would if you had another 10,000 hours to drill in? What would you want to improve on?
I would love to be better at like really inhabiting a character and sticking with it while improvising. I look at Jamie and my wife, and she's so good at that. And her training, I met her at UCB, but she came in with this fascinating subset of, first off, you need to have her on the podcast. Because
I'm dying to.
Her origin story is fucking fascinating.
Can't wait.
She did short form in college, went to the Ren Fair, did that for a few summers, and then overlapping with that, did Disney Prov in Orlando at a place called the Comedy Warehouse, which isn't there anymore, but it was on Pleasure Island. And they would do 4 short form shows a night. You couldn't curse. You got like 1 warning, and then you were fired.
Wow.
So she came.
This is a great teaser trailer for Jamie's episode, which will come out in a couple months. Yeah.
So her fucking skill set, watch your fucks, Bowie.
Her
skill set is insane. And so she came in able to, and sometimes it was, like, wow, that's a very, very big old lady you're doing there. But God, you're committing to it.
She's so good at characters.
She's so good at characters, and she's so unvain about them, and she'll there's not a sense, there's not a moment of like, you don't get that thing that you get from a lot of nervous, particularly female improvisers of like, I'm in doubt, so I'm going to seduce.
Right.
She would so much rather play the weird old granny, or the horrible middle management woman at your office,
right,
than just go into vixen.
Yeah, I feel like you saying that rings true of like my earlier days in improv, but I don't see that current drifting that way as much anymore.
Oh,
and
good.
I wonder
if
that's like a general sea change.
I think it's probably a general sea change. I think it's a cultural shift. And mind you, I have not yet mentioned the horrible things that young, nervous male improvisers do,
right,
when they immediately go to abusive and all like their mommy issues come out on stage, right, in the worst possible, most venomous way.
Right.
There's all sort of insecurity brings out horrible shit in no matter what gender you are. But yeah, so I wish I was better at that. My strengths are I'm a pretty good listener. And I'm good with specifics. I have a really good memory of things I have done. And I remember like a really early episode, a really early class in Armando, I think. Maybe Amy, but I feel like it was before that, where we were just doing sort of set decorating, just like tell us what this room looks like, and then you'll do a scene in it. And someone put us in a Duane Reade, which is the big East Coast drugstore chain. And okay, so describe the Duane Reade, and I was able to really summon what a Duane Reade looks like. And here's where I got my interesting laugh, and this is another core memory. I was like, and this aisle just says ethnic products, and it got a huge laugh from 1998, a predominantly white class, but it was still a thing I had noticed
because it is true.
It is true. And that was that moment of like, oh, so when they say specifics are funny, that's what they're talking about.
Right.
You are calling out something that doesn't get called out a lot. And I mean, that particular area that accommodates certain lotions and certain hair care products that I never have occasion to be in. But I remember being struck by seeing that sign.
It's also just a funny label for it.
Yeah.
And it is so specific. And it is like, that if that's in Duane Reade in real life, then this should be your environment that you're improvising in.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the first things I noticed that I could bring to the table was I was good at those weird little, like, why in God's name would you say it's out in my car when you could say it's out of my Corolla?
Right.
Like those little details. And it's standard like Buddhist stuff, God is in the details.
Right.
But
just your standard run of the mill Buddhist.
But it is,
stuff.
it's like the first thing that people learn when they like read a pamphlet about Buddhism, or they can't deal with their anxiety and the Paxil isn't working, so they start reading about they start tracking down these little sources of ordinary joy, and how God is everywhere.
Right.
And I think that was the first thing at which I showed an aptitude. Where did you start improv?
In Chicago.
I know, but like where?
IO and Second City.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was taking dual classes. And
was there as much turf war there between those two approaches?
Not really between those two. Everyone wanted to be on main stage at Second City by the time I got there.
Sure.
Yeah. And so like IO felt like a reasonable way to like bridge that gap and get stage time. There wasn't really, I felt more turf war in LA when I got here between like IO and UCB. And that felt like a one-sided war. Like everyone at IO, not everyone, but the people at IO who refused to do UCB would like talk shit about UCB.
100%.
But then at UCB,
100%.
like we're all like, yeah, and IO is great. Like I never heard people at UCB being like, oh, and those IO people.
Well,
but there was the opposite.
When we moved to LA in 2002, Jamie and I, we were very graciously allowed a chance to perform at IO by the management there. Basically, the UCB folk in New York called in a favor from their Chicago buddies and said, "Hey, can you let this group of New York expats do Herald Night?" And they did.
Yeah.
We called ourselves McManus, which was the name of the watering hole back in New York, which was the first of our mistakes. We had a chip on our shoulder, though. We came in a little like, "Oh, you guys use a piano for your heralds? All right. Well, that's really pretentious." And we I did not like the space. I found the sound at I.O. really weird.
That space here was one of the worst.
It sucked, right?
It was one of the worst ever.
The bar was doing better business than the theater, which means the bar, anytime the door opened, the bar was incredibly noisy.
Yeah.
And I know, but that's what it was like in Chicago back in the old days. Great, but we've evolved past that. You're basically playing in the back of a sports bar.
Right. And it's not really what it was like, at least for the bulk of like the I.O. Clark Street days
I'm
in
talking
Chicago.
Like early days,
Gotcha.
like Compass
When they
Theater,
were at
when you're really in the back of a bar,
Yeah.
Upstairs, and
Yeah.
Joan Rivers is fucking up everybody's scene, like that that core, like the magma that started, what we consider American improv.
Yeah.
So I didn't love playing there, but we all had we had some chips on our shoulder, and I wonder if we contributed to a little bit of the toxicity between the two theaters.
Oh, interesting.
I have since
You're
apologized
patient
to
zero.
James Grace.
Wow.
I have actually
Interesting.
since apologized. Like, we might have been a little cocky when we showed up there. And they assigned us a coach who was very Chicago and kept his shirts tucked in constantly. That thing that Chicago improvisers do where it's a dress shirt that's tucked into their khakis.
Yeah.
I'm not out of line in saying
I
this.
think used to do. I don't think it's like that anymore. Yeah.
Again, I'm ancient, Susie.
You're so
I'm
old.
so old.
My God. Yeah, that's so funny. Because all of that stuff is like frozen in like the rock of like improv history. Like it really is. That was a trope that was so prevalent.
And it was so funny too, because I when I was in New York and I saw the Chicago theaters fighting, I'd be like, "Guys, come on, relax, okay?"
Yeah.
First off, you're the second city for a reason. Simmer down. All right, your shit isn't that important. Take it easy. But also, like, we can all get along. Our styles don't have to conflict that much. Listen, we're all one big community. And then I moved to LA and became part of the problem. It was the goddamnedest thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you were
live
the
and learn.
issue. Let's talk about how improv has helped your acting, your scripted acting. You're very much a working actor. Yeah.
Immeasurably.
Bring us there. What do you...
Well, you have a sense of presence that if you've just done scripted work your whole life, you might not necessarily have. My favorite thing I've been able to do, and I can 100% credit UCB for this and improv in general, is you're doing a sitcom, you're doing anything really, anything with a script, and somebody fucks up their line in a way that will affect your line, and you're able to change your line on the fly because you were really paying attention. And in order for the joke to work, it has to be these three things in a certain order, and they fucked up that order, so you have to match that fuck up so the joke still lands.
Right.
That's a wonderful feeling. And that's something I've been able to do because of the listening that was drilled into me and at UCB and other places. I did this last year. I got to do this during the strike. I booked a play. I booked an adaptation of Uncle Vanya.
Wow.
Called Life Sucks by a writer named Aaron Posner. And I did, they cast me as Vanya, and it was this great cast. But there were moments throughout that play where you had to do crowd work. That's why it was an adaptation of Vanya, not a literal, where, Vanya goes to the edge of the stage and asks the audience what his chances are with the beautiful young professor's wife, which is not in the original Chekhov. But so it was different every night. And they would heckle me, and they would patronize me sometimes. And I had to kind of just roll with that. And then I had one line I had to get to at the end, and that cued the transition to the scene. And then the very last moment is a debate with the audience on whether or not the title is true. Does life actually suck? And that was different every night. depending on what kind of audience we had.
Yeah, cool.
And there's no way I do that kind of scripted work. And then meanwhile, everything else is written in stone. There are these monologues that have to happen here. We're following the basic beats of the original Uncle Vanya. It was insane. It was really insane, and there's no way I could have done it without all the improv stuff.
Yeah, you're bolstered with a courage and a sort of like bulletproofness from improv. That's like, I can dive into that territory. Yeah, cool.
And then in a really practical sense, it's just fun when on the rare occasions when you're doing something. And you are allowed to improvise a little bit at the end of a scene, so they can cut it off if they don't need it.
Yeah.
But I did. I was on that show Speechless for about 3 years, and Cedric Yarborough is another big improv guy, and he and I got to work together a bunch, and we were constantly fucking around just to make each other laugh, and they kept an alarming amount of that stuff, which was lovely.
How alarming.
It was nice.
Yeah,
it was really nice.
Great.
And it also felt good. And we would do, we'd honor the script, obviously, and do stuff as the writers worked very hard and we hit that. But if we could improvise within that world, so it isn't just wisecracks. It's okay. The game of this scripted scene is blank. Therefore, a perfectly reasonable game move would be this,
right?
And to just still be able to honor that was really fun, and it made you feel like a real collaborator.
Totally, and makes the writers happy too, because it's like, yes, that's what
the idea. That's what we're going for. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's close with a few rapid fire questions.
Okay, hit it.
Okay. What are your favorite types of characters to play?
Oh, I love an office scene because I'm still working through my trauma of working in offices so much. So I love like a middle management douchebag a lot. I'm really into that.
What style of douchebag is this guy? Are you passive aggressive? Are you judgmental?
I'm okay with passive aggressive, but you got to be careful not to just dip into Gary Cole in Office Space,
Yeah.
So I also like the kind of alpha guy who would like you to know that he fucking served for this country, and now he happens to be a wage slave at an office. But don't you fucking forget that he served, because I met those guys too.
Yeah, funny.
I love any sort of media professional falling apart. I love any sort of like DJ or news anchor at their wits' end. That's really fun to play. I love an obsequious wait staff. That's really great. And every once in a while, like someone will like exploit my gift for specifics. And I'll show up like, hi, guys, welcome. Have you guys dined with us before? And they'll be like, yes, can you tell us about your specials? I'm like,
right.
Fuck you, Seth. Yes, I can make up some specials right now, but fuck you.
The hostess was saying you would give us a menu tour of all of your new smoothies.
Yeah, exactly.
So
those
are
are some things I like to do, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a favorite type of object work that you have?
Oh, I'm better for a non-smoker. I'm decent with cigarettes. But I'm also very specific about like the real Zippo lighter that I'm using. You know,
and how many times it takes you to get it to work. Yeah,
and is this the guy who does it on his hand? Is this guy who does it on his leg? You know, there's that kind of thing. Is he the guy who closes it, tosses it up the air, and catches it in his inside breast pocket? Right. So yeah, I'm okay with that, but I'm also incredibly critical of myself and others with steering wheels, because that can get sloppy very easily.
You mean the people who aren't consistent with the width or the weight,
with the solidity of it?
Yeah, like you're it's not in a plane of space.
Yeah. And when you get to this stuff, that really gets on my nerves. And the other thing I'm going to say, that I made Seth laugh one time by he clearly made me a guy running a health food store. He initiated a scene where I was running this health food restaurant or store or something, and I immediately went into my pocket for a twisty and put my hair into a very deliberate ponytail. Was insanely proud of that.
Yeah,
was
great.
Really proud of my fake ponytail.
I love that. Also, you talking about both cigarettes and steering wheels makes me realize, there's a lot of mileage to be covered with how each character uses is a steering wheel,
Oh,
or like
100%.
how each character smokes. Like to play a smoking character isn't just to light a cigarette. It's like, where do they keep them? Is it in their breast pocket of their
Is it their
short
last
sleeve
one?
office shirt? Is it their last one? Right. Is it hand rolled? Are they an overhand smoker, or
Do they smoke everything like a
fingers?
joint? Do they smoke everything like a German soldier in World War II?
Right. Is it in a holder?
Yes.
Is it Audrey Hepburn style?
Yeah, there's a few variables. Todd Stashwick from Burn Manhattan was a prick about coffee cups. He would get like, okay, it's full now. That means it's very, very hot, but it's going to get cooler as you drink. And also as you drink, it's going to get lighter. And he was a real fucking hard ass about that stuff, but it was great.
I love it because it puts you in a full commitment place, and it also brings the audience into
and my
a
hand
world.
to God, you see the room around you come to life if you know the difference between a paper coffee cup, a massive Starbucks thing, a mug. You really see the whole room. If that is true, what else is true? The room comes to life around you.
There is a sense memory, both in emotion, like sparks of emotion that then inform dialogue. It's like, oh, the last time I was frustrated, like what would this person say? But also with object work and then filling in the room.
Yeah.
If you can remember like drinking hot chocolate out of a thermos, you know what this place looks like.
Exactly.
There's ski boots on the floor and melting water around them, and your socks are soaked, and
and you're walking kind of clumsily, because you still got your ski things on, or even your big boots, even if you weren't on the slopes, you just went tubing.
I love that stuff. I think you're making me realize I want to do more object work.
Have you
stuff
had
with
Bob
my
Dassey
students.
on the show?
Not yet, but he will be on. Yeah,
And obviously Bob Dassey's
the best
famous,
object worker
the best
in the
object
world.
worker in the business, and I remember him getting one of the biggest laughs of his career by parking his car and going to get out and realizing he still had his seatbelt on, and it was the tiniest little thing.
Yeah,
but he was just like, "What's this nonsense? God damn it!" And just the extra moment he took to undo his seatbelt, killed.
It's so funny. It's so specific.
Structural damage to the room.
That brings me to my last question. Favorite improvisers of yours, or do you have like a favorite improv show or a moment that stands out? Since you're a person built of core memories, do you have like, oh, this was the first time that I was like absolutely gobsmacked by a show, or
God, honestly, we'll be here all day.
I can't wait.
So feature was, and can I say something that I was in, but I was also watching the people around me?
Yeah.
So features cast was all four Naked Babies, my sketch group, which is me, Brian Husky, Seth Morris, Rob Corddry, Scott Armstrong, who wrote Hangover 2 and Road Trip and Old School, co-wrote those guys, Dinah Moe, Will Burson, who's an Oscar nominee now.
For what?
He was Oscar nominated for writing Jesus and the Black Messiah.
Wow.
The Fred Hampton movie.
He was my first Harold coach out here.
Yeah, he wrote the script that got Daniel Kaluuya his Oscar.
Incredible.
And I was in the movie for him with him.
Wow, cool.
Secunda came in, who was running the Goldbergs near the end of that show. It was a lot of it was a serious team. And our 1 year anniversary, we always wore suits for the show. We always wore suits and gowns for the show. But we did black tie for our first anniversary. So we all rented the same tuxedo and the women had gowns on. And which was, sucks to be the women because it's not easy to improvise in a gown, but
let
they
them wear
did
a
it.
tux.
I know. I absolutely should have. But we did, and this is a little dated, so bear with me, but I don't remember what our suggestion was, but it became very clear that we were doing a late period Woody Allen movie.
Okay.
And we knew that Corddry had a Woody Allen impression in the tank. We knew he could do that. And then the rest of us just played with the archetypes of, and again, like a 90s era where he's not quite as funny as he used to be. And the scandals are starting to drag him down and he's taking some very big swings. That era of Woody Allen.
Yeah.
And
Mighty Aphrodite.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So we had a Greek chorus for one point, and we had the ghost of his mother floating around.
Oh, that's great.
And there's one amazing thing where I endowed Seth as an incredibly famous actor who's just doing one day on this movie to say he worked with Woody Allen, and he just played this nondescript motorcycle cop or whatever. And everybody was so fucking on point that night that I had a crush on everybody on that stage. I mean, everybody.
And you married all of them.
And I married all of them.
Yeah.
But that was great. But I have to give out a of the people I just mentioned, Seth is so fun to play with.
He's great.
Seth is just so... Seth does that thing you're supposed to do where he makes you look great.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like playing catch from 4 feet away with that guy.
And he's such a good actor that
he's a great actor.
You can't help but be in the moment because he's really in there.
He
is really
and
listening.
His gift for specifics is fucking insane.
Yeah.
Because he's lived in so many different circumstances. He's from the Bay Area, so he has all that weird Northern California hippie shit. But then he lived in all sorts of weird apartments in New York for a while, and now he's married with a kid.
Yeah.
And so he's got this incredible frame of reference from all of these things he's done that he's a delight to work with. And I'd be remiss if I didn't call out Jamie. Jamie's fucking great, and her shadings of archetypes are really fun to watch. Like, she'll take like the Jewish mother that you've seen before, but find new colors in it that are so fascinating and so... Like, sometimes you've worked with somebody for so long, you can kind of see the strings, like, oh, I know how she got there. And there's other times with Jamie where I'm just like, I have no idea how you managed to pull that particular line out. She had a thing, this isn't exactly her improv work, but she does that character Beverly, who's
Rana
loosely
and
based
Bev.
on her mom and her mom's friends. And out of nowhere, she pulls out that Beverly's favorite show is So Help Me Todd, you know, with Diane Wiest and the other guy. And it was just such the exact fucking thing that your mom would be into.
Yep.
It was such a gorgeous pull.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing I'm in awe of. So yeah, Jamie and Seth are two of my favorites. But there've been a lot of great people over the years. And God, I played ASCAT a couple weeks ago, and the youngsters coming up.
So many heavy hitters.
Dhruv Singh.
Yeah, he's
Jesus
incredible.
Christ.
Yeah.
The speed with that motherfucker.
Yeah.
The fucking speed on that guy. Carl Tart just booked SNL writing. He's incredibly fun to watch. There's all the Convoy guys, obviously. Alex Fernie is an improviser's improviser. I love him. Yeah, I'm still fanboying hard over a lot of these people.
That's great. Do you have anything you'd like to plug? Plug your book, first of all.
I'll plug my book because there's even more stuff about this stuff in there. I wrote a book called No Job for a Man, which is a memoir. And the title comes from a thing that my dad used to say about the acting profession. And that's not great. But
it's a very funny memoir, and the writing is so tight.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so
that means
smart.
a great deal. That means a great deal coming from you, Susie. Thank you. Yeah, it was not easy to write, but I'm glad I wrote it. And it also isn't it's not Mommy Dearest. I'm not like doing this slam piece on my parents or anything. I wrote about them. They really did the best they could with the tools they had.
Yeah.
They were older than boomers. My parents were not boomers. They were silent generation. So they didn't really have a war to call their own. You know, they don't really remember World War II, so they're not the greatest generation.
You think you have it rough? We didn't have a war.
Yeah, no, seriously.
There's nothing we can
claim. By the time they were born, the Depression was over. By the time they were teenagers, the 50s were up and running, and everything looked great. But by the time they were like 30, the hippies were like, oh, don't trust anyone over 30.
Right.
So they were left out of that. You know, they're not Woodstock people by any measure.
No, they were the turn it down people.
Very much so, yeah. And and that gave them a very singular sense of values and priorities that made it a little hard to connect with them. But I think they come off pretty well.
But No Job for a Man is the book.
No Job for a Man is a book.
Great.
And your better bookstores will have it. But there's also an ebook and an audiobook that I read.
Perfect. And check out Super Married with you and Jamie Dunbow.
Yeah, we got to get some dates on the books, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
If you have a question about improv that you would like me to ask a future guest, email it to yesalsopod@gmail.com and I will get it on the show. If you're a fan of the show, follow us on Instagram at yesalsopod And please help us out by liking, rating, reviewing, clicking, sending, talking, and blasting us to your improv communities. That will help us out a lot. If you're a theater who would like to host us for a live recording and improv show, let us know at yesalsopod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to Ryan Rosenberg, who produced this thing with his generous help and his unlimited knowledge about all things podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. No, we won't, Susie. That's not how podcasts work. They won't even see us. They will listen to us. So it's actually the opposite of both things you said. Thanks for listening, and you will listen to us next week. Maybe. We don't know.